The problem. The problem is the system. This is a problem that cannot be fixed. The problem is the system. The problem is not in the system. The problem is the system. The system cannot be fixed because the system itself is the problem. The system is not broken. The system works as it was designed to work. It harms you. You do not like what it does. That does not mean it is broken or flawed. It simply means it was not designed to benefit you. The system, in a word, is parasitic. What this means, there is a substantial portion of the population that consumes more than they produce. This means the live off what is produced by others. If you owned the world and ran it as a business, there is a substantial population you would fire. But you are not their boss. They are your boss, and they decide how much value they have. They also decide what value you have. In other words, it is the parasites that determine what you get to keep and what they get to take. Let's imagine your boss as an industrial farmer who owns thousands of acres. He owns them and you farm them. You work from dawn to dusk planting and weeding and reaping and doing all the work that needs to be done on a farm. Your boss does nothing but check the books periodically to make sure your labor is producing the profits he thinks you ought to be producing. He looks at what you are doing as a cost of doing business, a cost that should be eliminated if possible. You represent a cost to the business, though it is you who do all the work. But he looks at himself as a person who is worth the many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. He pays himself. The owner is the only person on the farm who is considered an asset. All other workers represent a liability to the company. He and his family could own this farm for hundreds of years, and they would siphon off millions of dollars from the business, despite never doing a day's work. This situation exists all over the nation and the world. There are hundreds of millions of people not producing anything of value, yet living, and often living quite well. To understand the problem, think of a family. If the man or woman is alone, they would struggle hard to make a life. A man and a woman together have the greatest potential for making a good life. The man and the woman as a couple can produce the most income and goods for the least output of labor than any other pairing. When children come along, the situation becomes difficult for the pair because they have additional mouths to feed and less time to provide for the family needs. But when the children grow up, things become progressively better because the children begin to add to the family's fortune without adding a lot to the family's total costs. However, if the children do not work or are not fully invested in the fortunes of the family, things could get even worse than before because the children consume more as they age and the parents become less able to provide for them. This is when the children stop being dependents and become parasitic. We see the fortunes of the family rise and fall as the individuals in the family contribute to the family or consume more than they produce. Multiply this situation, and one has the situation of a nation or the world. If everyone works and provides for their needs, the social unit prospers. But the larger the percentage of the population that lives off of the work of the rest, the worse off the community is. This is why government intervention generally only makes things worse. Giving people more money gives them greater access to the available goods and services. But if there are no more goods and services produced, the increased income only drives up prices. The only solution to poverty is increased production. The problem of poverty is magnified according to how much the non-productive sector consumes. Some have blamed the problem on too much money going into entertainment and welfare. But the problem is more general than that. The problem is the percentage of the population not producing sufficient income to match their consumption multiplied by their average income. A large parasitic population living on a meager income does less damage than a small population living like kings. But the problem is not the parasitism specifically. The problem is the situation that enables parasites to exist and indeed legitimizes them. Someone cannot just decide to be a parasite. There must be a system in place that legitimizes this kind of behavior. Some call it the system that justifies parasites, the law of the jungle. It is the proposition that might makes right and the end justifies the means. Needless to say, this philosophy is perpetuated by those gaining an advantage from it. But behind this law is the idea of power being used as a bargaining chip or a commodity. The belief is that if a person is blessed with unusual levels of power, this power or office can be used to trade for goods and services. The elites are power merchants trading power for property. Idols represent the power of the elites. An elite is a person who thinks power gives or translates into rights, and rights mean power. It is the sense that one has inalienable rights that mark a parasite. He or she does not acquire things through work, but through rights, through a legitimizing process based on some innate virtue or merit. The idol of the tribe represents the people's virtue or status and right to what they can possess. The tribal idol justifies the power of the tribe. The idol, or god, represents the right of the people to the good things of life. One's office or title is just another idol, though more personal. The office a person holds, or the title they have, is a justifier for their claim on the wealth of others. The problem, then, is ego or self-validation. Some might call it subjectivity or the lack of objective standards of comparison. The identifiers of a person become a justifier for his claim on the property of others. The idol of the nation becomes the justifier of the person. The solution. The solution is honesty. We need to be honest about our situation. This leads to equality because no one is more worthy or less worthy than another. There are no justifiers that are able to legitimize expropriating the wealth of others. The solution to parasitism is to work for what we want and make no claim on anything created by another. If this principle was understood, it would cause immediate problems for the people of this system, because we know we claim ownership of property that we did not create. No human being has created an asset or any part of an asset. All physical things were created by God, not by man. We do, as humans, add value to assets. We do this through the addition of labor, but if you do not labor, what value are you creating? The problem is that some people are not creating anything of value. They are not adding value to assets through labor. They must now share in the value created by others. To do this, they need a way to make claims against the value created by others. They do this through programs of social justice, which purport to identify features in certain people that justify them living as parasites. The solution is to stop these claims being made or legitimized, and the only way to do this is through a process of separating. We need to separate from the parasites and from the system that legitimizes them. We need to escape the lies and the deceit and all of the structural changes that these things create. We cannot have a system built on lies, because ultimately such a system must collapse. Consciousness is the same as faith. We can only have faith in what we can be fully conscious of. Our faith is a measure of our consciousness awareness. We need to become conscious of the lies of our life, the places where what we do does not produce the best possible results. We are the caretakers of the earth. We need to work as if for the earth. The parasite acts as if the earth exists to care for him, and if the rest of us are suppliers of his needs. The parasite believes he or she is entitled to what he or she can get from the rest of us. We need to regain the rights of ownership and regenerate the way we understand ownership to inoculate it from the predation of parasites. We do not own as a physical act, but as a moral relationship. We own what we create as we own our sons and our daughters. What we create is owned by us, but logically owned by the logic of the relationship. We own our sons and daughters because we created them, and there is no other relationship that can take precedence. This is how we own what we create commercially. We can refer to this as possessive ownership or ownership by virtue of our possession. If we each learn to honor the possessions of others, then ultimately those who produce something will be the sole and uncontested owner of it, until they transfer this to someone else.